Welcome to the first United Front radio show of the new year, 2015. This is Daniela Walls, National Chair of the Tax Wall Street Party, with Kyle McCarthy, founding member of the United Front Against Austerity. Tonight we are joined by Larry Pinkney, veteran of the original Black Panther Party. Larry is the spokesperson for Reverend Edward Pinkney. Larry is a former Minister of the Interior of the Republic of New Africa, and like Reverend Edward Pinkney, a former political prisoner himself, and the only American to have successfully self-authored his civil political rights case to the United Nations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Welcome, Larry.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted. I am absolutely delighted. Thank you.
Well, we're of course delighted too, Larry, and we met working together on this case of Free Pinkney, the case of Reverend Edward Pinkney in Benton Harbor, Michigan. The first thing people always ask me is if you two are related.
Everybody asks that because we have the same last name and we spell it exactly the same. We're not biologically related. We're certainly related in terms of being brothers in the struggle.
You could say that that's how all three of us are related here.
That's right.
Kyle, you said that you had some information connecting what's happening in Benton Harbor with Ferguson, Missouri, and that information was going to blow our minds.
Maybe this is a good way to start it out because I think we can use this to show the economic component behind these issues that people see as racial strife. Anyone who's been following the case of Reverend Pinkney knows that Benton Harbor is the headquarters of the Whirlpool Corporation. One of Whirlpool's biggest suppliers is called the Emerson Electric Company, and they make electric motors, temperature control devices, just a lot of different things like that. Just like Whirlpool, they were one of the pioneers of offshoring. So they were involved in mergers and acquisitions and sending all their production from the United States over to India, Azerbaijan. Well, Emerson Electric is located a literal stone's throw from where Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. I mean, you could throw a baseball from one place to the next. And Ferguson, West Florissant Avenue, this used to be where all of the production was done for the Emerson Electric Company. Back in the mid-90s, they drafted something called Vision 2015.
Whoa, so what you're saying is that in the mid-90s they drafted a vision already for 2015?
Yep, Vision 2015 was drafted in 1997 for the city of Ferguson, and since then they've had a bunch of different land use studies, zoning analysis. It's a plan to redistrict things away from residential housing and toward things like hospitals and retail use. Just yesterday, the governor of Missouri, Nixon, approved a key component of this, which is a project to widen the sidewalks, basically showing that this is a long-term plan of quote-unquote urban renewal, but what it amounts to is ethnic cleansing.
Right.
The riots in Ferguson, whether it was planned this way or not, served the purpose of lowering property values so that the city or the state or whatever can come in through eminent domain. These businesses are all burned to the ground. The property values have gone down. They take that away, drive the people out of town, turn their homes into a hospital or whatever it is, then reconnect Ferguson back into, like a commuter suburb of St. Louis. It's a very similar thing to what is happening in Benton Harbor, where this process of ethnic cleansing is not happening overnight, but it is happening with state and federal money. It's happening through the aegis of this thing called public-private partnerships, to use federal and local taxpayer money to get the residents to almost pay for their own removal. After that's done, they drive them out, they buy everything up on the cheap. Voila, you've got another white suburb, or in the case of Benton Harbor, I think they're basically just trying to absorb that into St. Joseph and turn it into, a tourist destination.
That's amazing. Well, it's not really amazing, but it's startling, frankly, how you have put this together, because the connection that you've made between Ferguson and what is happening with Reverend Edward Pinkney and the entire community in the township or city of Benton Harbor, Michigan, Wow. Yes, this is important. Frankly, Kyle, I would love for you to restate that in very simple, plain terms. I mean, I definitely get it. What, in essence, as I understand it, that you've said is this public-private partnership is really a veil for nothing more than ethnic cleansing. Of course, they don't use that term, but that's the reality. This is very powerful.
And I think you hit on the key aspect of it, which is the public-private partnership is more controversial in Europe than it is here. It's very big in Chicago. I actually did some work for a company that specializes in development finance and development agreements around this kind of stuff. The main one is called tax increment financing, where they basically, a developer group comes in and they say, okay, we're going to partner with the city of Chicago or West Florissant Initiative. We're going to go in 50-50 in terms of who's financing this project. We need the state grants to do this, but then it's going to be turned into incremental taxation. We get paid upfront for the project, we the developers. The taxpayers are going to pay this off over the next 20 years through future tax earnings because we're projecting that we're going to bring in these new businesses. And basically, if the project goes bad, then the developer goes bankrupt because everybody already got paid, and now the taxpayers are stuck with the bill.
Right.
What are the public-private partnerships in Benton Harbor?
This whole Cornerstone Initiative, or Cornerstone Alliance, to build the Harbor Shores project, which is the golf course, to build even the Whirlpool corporate headquarters, was done with state and federal grants.
How do they consider that private golf course that they built on public land to be public?
It's public in the sense that they say, it's going to raise all this tax revenue, it's going to bring in jobs, blah, blah, blah. So the public takes the risk in the sense that it's financed through future taxation that doesn't exist yet.
That's what Reverend Pinkney was protesting, though the PGA not paying any taxes in that area and not hiring local labor to build the golf course.
Somebody has to pay to turn parking lots and the park and all this stuff into a PGA golf course, so that the money is fronted by state grants, or it's fronted by borrowing from this front group, which is the Cornerstone Alliance. Basically, their note is justified by the fact that we're going to have future taxes paying off this original debt.
Future taxes from the poor Black unemployed residents of Benton Harbor. While Whirlpool, a multinational corporation with $16 billion in profit annually, pays no taxes in the area where they're headquartered, they're relying on people living below the poverty line to pick up this tab.
It's just basically a con game.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
It's really nothing more than it's really not all that sophisticated, but anyway, a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. It sounds to me, the public, in this case in Benton Harbor, but all over the country, but in this case in Benton Harbor, is saddled with paying for their own ethnic cleansing. They're the ones who are being removed from the community, all in the name of supposedly bringing in jobs and money, which is a farce. No significant jobs, no significant monies that the communities would ever receive. In fact, if anything, the communities are being destroyed. And what Reverend Edward Pinkney has been opposing is this corporate hegemony, this corporate domination coming in. And it's between, as you said, public and private. Again, I'll restate this, is what Reverend Edward Pinkney has been opposing. Whirlpool Corporation, a multinational corporation, which is headquartered in none other than Benton Harbor, is a big major player, probably the major player in disenfranchising, and I repeat, disenfranchising the populace of Benton Harbor. That's the name of the game, as Reverend Edward Pinkney sees it, as I see it, as a growing, increasing amount of people not only in Benton Harbor, but really nationally and internationally see it. Yeah, this is a bombshell. It's a bombshell in the sense that you've done a fantastic job, Kyle, of linking it and making it very clear, very simple to people as to what is going on and how it's being done.
I think we'd like to hear from you as a person with a lot more experience and who can trace this back to earlier roots. It seems like the black community in general, or black neighborhoods, get used as a pawn in this game historically, where in Benton Harbor or in Ferguson, people came up for the jobs with Whirlpool or with Emerson Electric, and then once the community is prosperous enough, once there's a labor union, once people are gaining a foothold, then basically the whole thing gets kicked down the curb and the jobs get sent to Mexico or whatever it is. Can you give us some perspective just going back to the 60s and the 70s, and what was your experience in the Black Panther Party? What was the group set up to do, and then how did it relate to the economic conditions at that time, and sort of what are some of the lessons that you can draw from there to what's going on today?
Well, essentially what has happened, here we are now in the year of the beginning of 2015. The game has really not changed. It's been tweaked, if you will. But the game in terms of how everyday, ordinary black, white, brown, red, and yellow people, and I'm talking just about everyday, ordinary people, struggling people, all right, how we are disenfranchised is essentially the same. In the late 60s and early 70s, they were doing the same thing, only people were not hip to it at that point. I believe you're in Chicago. Then, Kyle, you certainly must remember or might remember Cabrini Green.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And what was done in eliminating that particular living situation for many, many, many thousands of primarily Black/African Americans who were living in that complex of Cabrini Green. But it wasn't just Cabrini. It was other complexes also throughout Chicago and, frankly, throughout the nation. But the game was, we remove it, okay, or they remove it, you dig? Basically, kick the people who are living there to the curb. And what's done is they would then bring in businesses and or housing that the everyday people could not afford, could come nowhere near to affording to live in.
Yeah. I worked right across from Cabrini Green for, 10 years, but they brought in the quote-unquote mixed income housing, which were $250,000 condos.
It's disgusting, it's sickening, and it's a lie. And by the way, none other than Obama himself, the illustrious warmongering drone man president currently of this nation, was also directly involved in that.
Did they fully bulldoze Cabrini Green, or is it still around?
It's my understanding that there is no Cabrini Green.
Now that's 15,000 displaced people.
That's right. I'm so glad you made this connection, Kyle, because you see, it's not about or simply about the rebellions in, for example, Ferguson. Okay, I call them rebellions as opposed to riots, but the rebellions in Ferguson, the name of the game is manipulation. They manipulate through the corporate stream. I call it the corporate stream, vomit stream media. The media emphasizes certain things because the corporate stream media is nothing more than the propaganda arm, really, for these corporate bloodsuckers nationally and globally. But in this case, as we relate it directly to Ferguson and directly to Benton Harbor, Michigan, it's the same game. It's just been tweaked. That's all. It's just been tweaked,
It's not too much different than the Indian removal in the 1830s.
Right.
Get the Indians riled up. People forget that the Cherokee in North Carolina were more prosperous than the white Southerners.
Right.
They had better farms, better technology. They're running their own newspapers. They were basically fully assimilated. And then under the pretext of riots, Andrew Jackson moves them out on the Trail of Tears. And then what do they bring in? Slave plantations.
In fact, I think you're being very kind when you say that people forget. Quite frankly, my brother, I don't think that most people even knew, much less forget.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's a repetition of the same game on all levels, okay? But it's been highly tweaked now. And of course, now they got this nominally black colored guy as their front man in Washington, D.C., none other than drone man Barack Obama, doing their bidding for them while he, as the native people said, speaking with very forked tongue. Very forked tongue. I'm so glad you brought in the thing about the indigenous native people, because too often this has been left out. And whether it's poor white folks, whether it's indigenous natives, whether it's African Americans, black people, we are all under serious assault, attack by these corporate monsters who are working hand in hand with a government that is corporate controlled. We don't have a people's government. We have a corporate controlled government.
Where do people in Ferguson or Benton Harbor or Detroit or Flint or Cabrini Green go, especially when their property values are so low? Where do displaced people for the most part end up? In most cases, there's not a place to go. In Benton Harbor, couldn't a company like Whirlpool, who takes in $16 billion in profits annually, come up with a better plan? If they don't bring back the jobs, then at minimum, could they buy them out at high prices? That's not ideal because this is a community, obviously. But are these corporations just so evil or just uncreative that they can't come up with some plan?
Well, the plan, crystal clear, is to take total control. Let's be specific about Benton Harbor and why they despise Reverend Edward Pinkney so much.
Yes.
Reverend Edward Pinkney was exposing the connection between Whirlpool Corporation and how Whirlpool Corporation in Benton Harbor, in de facto terms, in de facto actual terms, really controls economically, politically, and socially. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it controls the court system. It controls it, all right? It controls the judges. It controls the police. It controls all the civil, if you will, aspects of the community, all right? But Whirlpool, because it's like other blood-sucking corporations, is avaricious. It's greedy. It's avaricious. It can never, ever be satisfied. So they want it all, as do other corporations. So where do these people go? I'll tell you where they go. They go to the penitentiary, or they become homeless. Do you think Whirlpool gives a damn where they go? Of course you know they don't. These corporations don't give a damn. And they don't give a damn about the color either. Be you black, be you red as an indigenous native person, be you a poor white, it doesn't matter to them because they're bloodsuckers. They are vampiric. I call them euphemistically vampires, economic bloodsuckers. And that's why it was so important for Whirlpool and its lackeys in the judicial system of Benton Harbor to do their utmost to take down Reverend Edward Pinkney.
It's important to remember that Whirlpool doesn't need local labor.
Mm-mm.
Well, remember the story on the last radio show we did with Reverend Pinkney where he said there was so much work in Benton Harbor at one time that a person could walk out of a job at 9 a.m. and find another job by 11 a.m., walk out of that job by 1, and be hired again by 4 p.m., all at a good union wage. And that's not cushy. That's what a proper American standard of living is.
There's more work than labor. And right now, if you're Whirlpool or if you're Emerson Electric, you don't need local labor because all of that is being done overseas. Whirlpool, there's no advantage to Whirlpool or related and allied corporations to having any of those people living there other than get them to pay for the water treatment plant, get them to pay for the Harbor Shores project. Basically, we're going to suck anything you have out of you, and then we're going to drive you out, and you can go wherever you go.
You can go to hell. That's what they're really saying to the people, is you can go to hell. And the corporate stream, vomit stream media says, oh, they're going to bring in jobs. They're not bringing in jobs. They're taking out jobs. They're taking away jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real about this. Not to mention the fact that in Benton Harbor, I remember back in August of 2010, I was in Benton Harbor with Reverend Pinkney. We were opposing and still oppose Whirlpool Corporation and their lackeys, and I mean L-A-C-K-E-Y, their lackeys in the judicial system and their political lackeys, such as this Sambo. I'm going to say it like it is, all right? This Sambo sellout mayor, James Hightower, who is biologically, I emphasize, biologically black, okay? So they control. The name of the game is really very simple. Take, lie, and make sure they control everything.
I'm glad you brought up prison system, which in Michigan is notoriously for-profit.
Yeah.
There's one other area where you just look at rich financiers, they're going to look at the poor community and say, what value do these people have to us? And if we don't need their labor, then you can either get taxpayer money by sending them to jail.
Right.
Or Hightower is a PR executive for Lakeland Hospital in St. Joseph. And the other, in this Ferguson, the West Florissant redevelopment plan, they make a lot of mention of hospitals. The guy that ran Emerson Electric for like 27 years then went on to start a healthcare private equity firm. Only quote-unquote healthy area of the economy is healthcare, because there's a lot of sick people out there and they need to get treatment somehow. So if we can't send you to prison, we can make you sick and send you to the dialysis clinic. We can send you to the hospital, and we're going to get that taxpayer money through Medicaid, I mean.
Another great connection that you've just made, my brother. Another great connection that you've just made, Kyle. So-called healthcare is not about healthcare. We have to understand it is an industry. It is not a service. It has become an industry, a corporate industry. They don't give one rat's petunia about the health of everyday, ordinary, struggling people. As a matter of fact, the more unhealthy that they can make us, the better they feel. Why? Because they can suck, I call it blood sucking. They can suck every bit, every penny, every dollar out of poor people. So when people say healthcare in this country, I outright laugh, because it is an industry. It's like me making you sick and then saying, well, okay, I never admit that I made you sick, but then I turn around and say, well, you need this, this, and this. That's what they do across the board. And it's simple. It is not complicated. It is actually quite simple.
Think about how much money it costs to keep Reverend Pinkney in prison per year. What if they gave that $45,000 a year back into the community, reinvested it?
Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. Because that would be the right thing to do. You know, Benito Mussolini, the former fascist dictator of Italy back in World War II, Benito Mussolini put it this way. Fascism, simply stated, is the combination of corporations and government. This is fascism. People think about fascism only in terms of goose stepping, or only in terms of people marching down the street all dressed in whatever they're dressed in with swastikas. But no. We are in the 21st century, and fascism has taken on a different pale. What we have is a corporatocracy, which I call 21st century fascism. And this is what Reverend Edward Pinkney has been fighting against in Benton Harbor, Michigan. If you look at the absurdity of them turning off the water in Detroit, another city in Michigan. And if you look at the privatization all across the country, and Daniela, you mentioned the gentrification. Gentrification is nothing more than a fancy term for ethnic cleansing. Let's be honest. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to hear more about your life experience, and especially as a political activist. Daniela was telling me a lot of interesting things you had talked about regarding Cointelpro and how that operates. I think we're just really interested to hear from your experience how you go about forming a political organization to fight back against these problems, and then what are the pitfalls that you encounter when you try to do that.
Thank you for this opportunity. Cointelpro, Cointelpro, simply means counterintelligence program. For the audience, the Cointelpro was set up nationwide by the federal government, both Democrats and Republicans, by the way. Let's be honest, all right? It was set up initially in the 1950s. It was tweaked in the 1960s and 70s, and it continues today in such things as Provision 1021 of the NDAA, the so-called National Defense Authorization Act, but it also continues in the Patriot Act. It also continues, I can go on and on and on. And of course, the Obamatron drone man has actually exacerbated it, both internally and externally. Now, I am a veteran of the original Black Panther Party. By the way, folks, don't be confused. I said the original Black Panther Party, not the so-called new Black Panther Party. Please do not be confused. Worlds apart. No comparison.
Would you guess that that is some kind of a counterinsurgency to discredit the original Black Panther Party?
Yeah, of course I would. The proof of the pudding is in the taste. Where are their national programs to bring people together? Where are their national medical programs? We had free clinic programs for everybody, by the way. Didn't have to be black, all right? National free clinic programs, free healthcare programs, shoe programs, clothes programs, breakfast for children programs. These are just some of the many programs that the Black Panther Party, the original and real Black Panther Party, engaged in, which is why we were considered such a threat by the federal government, be it Democrat or Republican, all right? Nothing has really changed. They want to destroy the legacy of the party, but they will never be successful at that. So then along come these so-called new Black Panthers. Well, excuse me? What are you doing to serve the people? As we said back in the day, in the late 60s, early 70s, serve the people body and soul. Body and soul. That means there's nothing romantic. It's nothing romantic about this. This is drudgery. It's hard struggle. It's hard living. Either we're about it or we're not. So many of us, including myself, many of us in the party were physically attacked, beaten, set up, framed, and that's what the Cointelpro counterintelligence program was all about. All people have to do really is go back, read the U.S. congressional records, which show clearly that the counterintelligence program, or what we call Cointelpro, was set up to quote, frame, to discredit, to imprison, and in many, many cases, to murder those of us who dared to try and get people to critically think and organize for their own, self-interest. And when I say their own, I mean collective self-interest. All right. Just read the records in the U.S. Congress. I believe it was Frank Church, the Church Committee records of the United States Congress. Nothing has changed. It's only been tweaked, just like what the corporations are doing today.
Are we experiencing a version of Cointelpro by taking out one of our leaders, like Reverend Pinkney? It slows down the movement to provide for the people.
Of course, I think that what this is about is to try and neutralize. That's another word they use. There's a book called Saying No to Power. The introduction was written by the late, great Howard Zinn. The book itself was written by William Mandel. Okay, it's called Saying No to Power. Look at pages 500 to 504, which happens to be a part of the book where I'm actually written about. You will see the government then and the government today, the corporate controlled government, okay, was all about doing what? Neutralizing people like Reverend Edward Pinkney. In that case, it was me. That we're going to neutralize this, I won't use the word on air, this so-and-so, okay, because he has the ability to organize and unify black, white, brown, red, and yellow people. Ooh, against us and for themselves. It's like, we can't have that. That's where I call them Negroidians, like Obama come in, okay, and James Hightower come in, because they are nothing more than Sambos. And if anybody wants to understand what I mean when I use the word Sambo, I mean traitor to humanity, all right? And that is what both Obama and, in this case, as far as Benton Harbor is concerned, this James Hightower is. He's a traitor to humanity, not just to black people, to all people. We have to understand that that is something that we have to stop. Not only stop it, but reverse it. I'm sorry. I guess
and you can see the way they use their propaganda going all the way up to the Heritage Foundation hit pieces they've been writing about Reverend Pinkney, and how they use mind games and manipulation and deceit to create confusion and make Edward Pinkney into the enemy instead of the freedom fighter he is for the people. They're trying to trick us.
We call it going for the ghost. In other words, as Brother Malcolm X said, to bamboozle the people. You dig? One of the things I loved about Brother Malcolm, and I had the honor to actually meet and have spent some time with Malcolm before they killed him. Malcolm grew from being what we call a cultural black nationalist to an internationalist, where he said, wait a minute, all the people need to come together. You dig? All the people of all colors. And then, Lord have mercy, Malcolm had to be killed because he really wanted to unite the people, all right? He never forgot his roots, where he came from. And this is what we need to understand. But, of course, how many people today even know that? How many people today even know about the speech that Dr. King gave on April 4th, 1967 in Harlem? Beyond Vietnam speech. I would urge everyone, read that speech, where Dr. King pointed out, literally, April 4th, 1967. When was Dr. King killed? When was he assassinated by our own government? He was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, year to the day of his having delivered that speech. And Beyond Vietnam was where he came out in that speech and made it clear that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world then and now is our own government. I would urge everyone to understand that. They tweaked it now. So what they said was, we'll go get ourselves a colored guy. We'll put him up there, put blackface on Empire. And meanwhile, they're screwing all of us. Black, white, brown, red, and yellow. All of us. Both internally and externally. And Reverend Edward Pinkney, was a thorn in their side. But you know what? He's going to be an even bigger thorn, as all of us are going to become. I'm excited about the fact that there's a growing awareness amongst everyday struggling people, a growing awareness. Look, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And what do I mean by that? All power to the people was one of the slogans that the original Black Panther Party said. We say all power to black people, all power to white people, all power to brown people, all power. We said all power to the people. Everyday, ordinary, struggling people. I am heartened to some extent today, in the year beginning of 2015, where more and more people are waking up to what the real deal is, both nationally and globally throughout Mother Earth.
Globally and internationally is extremely important. The case of Reverend Edward Pinkney has everything in the American Chamber of Horrors And I make a plea to Russia, especially if they're giving you a hard time over Navalny, the answer is Pinkney. Navalny is the leading Russian dissident. The US and British are now launching a new attack on Putin that he repressed Navalny. The US and Britain are now saying, look at what these thugs in the Kremlin have done to Navalny. The slogan is, anytime the US says Navalny, Russia should say Pinkney.
Hell yeah.
But I think you had brought up Martin Luther King, and I think we've lost our historical compass. We especially lost the idea of service to a political program.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
At the Tax Wall Street Party, we used the Frederick Douglass quote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." We both used this quote, Larry, separately to each other. The first time that we met, power concedes nothing without a demand. And we believe what we need right now is a program that is a list of economic demands, similar in many ways to FDR's Economic Bill of Rights. And like the Black Panther Party, which has clear economic demands, we are organizing now to be a political power base for the poor and oppressed.
You know, the Black Panther Party, and we were decimated. I mean, we were decimated by the government. Many, for example, Kyle, you're in Chicago, right? What I'm saying is, Chicago, to this day, there are many people who remember Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were brutally murdered in their sleep by the Chicago police working with the federal government. Why? Why? Because they were pulling people together. See, they like it. The government and the corporate government, they love it when people don't have a program, as you mentioned, Daniela. The Black Panther Party had a 10-point political program. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what the program was about. It was a 10-point program that dealt with the economic, political, and social aspects of poor people, beginning in the black community, because obviously that's where we began. That's why the party spread so rapidly. We didn't know that we were going to spread that rapidly, my God. But people resonated with, oh, this is really, I get it. I get it. So programs, political programs, real programs are extremely, extremely important. All this mishmash nonsense, pie in the sky, I call it Obamatron economics. Or it could be bushwhack, as in Bush economics, but it's all nonsense. As Brother Malcolm said, it's just meant to bamboozle us. To bamboozle us. Keep us in fear, keep us divided, and that way keep us controlled.
We don't need their complicated economic quote-unquote solutions. We need a common sense economic platform that everybody can understand and everybody can get behind. And that's when we become dangerous, when we all unite behind a common sense economic political platform.
Hell yes. Go ahead, sis.
From within the Black Panther organization, I've read or talked with Daniela about this a little bit. There seem to be different layers of Cointelpro, where maybe, you know, there's the mass media layer, but within an organization, there's a layer of trying to confuse people and use them against each other. There's a layer of trying to compromise people. You know, it kind of goes up the ladder before you get to outright assassinations. What are some of the challenges in running a group that grows that quickly in that time or even now? How does the FBI or the powers that be get people to fight against each other, to try to tear the thing down, and to try to divide you from the community that you're trying to organize?
Well, in addition to the corporate stream, vomit stream media, putting out lies, nothing but lies about whatever you're trying to do. In addition to that, there is what we refer to as agent provocateurs. They will actually, and that's what they did with the Black Panther Party. They would send what I call Negroidians. Oh, I want to join. I'm for the people, right? But their job, really, they were pigs. They were state police. I'm not talking about troopers, y'all. I'm talking about they were working for the national state. They were not working for the people, because those are two separate entities. They are the antithesis, if you will, of each other. Now, what they did was they infested as much as they could the original Black Panther Party with as many agent provocateurs as they could. Some we knew about, some we didn't. There's a book called The Glass House Tapes by Louis Tackwood. Came out back in I believe it was the early 70s, 72, 73. Anybody who gets that book, The Glass House Tapes, and reads the whole book will see. And it wasn't just with the Black Panther Party, by the way. They did the same thing with the Young Lords, the Puerto Ricans. They did the same thing with SDS, Students for Democratic Society, which was primarily white. They did the same thing with the American Indian movement. Okay, we have political prisoners such as Leonard Peltier today who have been set up and framed and have been in prison for decades. We also have many, many, many Panthers, all right, who are still in prison and who have been in prison for decades after having been set up, framed, quote unquote, neutralized by this government, which is anything but a government for, of, and by the people. Anything but that.
Shocked to find how many political prisoners we still have, and we have right now sitting in jail after 30 years because of Cointelpro, white
right.
and black
That's
and
right.
Indian. I mean, there are people for nonviolent offenses that are in prison 30 years now.
Whether it's nonviolent or violent, the fact is that they didn't commit it. They did not commit the offense.
Right.
Okay? So the name of the game is to charge you with the most heinous, despicable, hair-raising offense that they can. For example, Brother Pratt, P-R-A-T-T, we call him Jijaga, who was a Southern California Panther. They set him up on murder charges, said he killed this white couple. And they knew they were setting him up, all right? Turns out, Brother Man wasn't within 500 miles of where the incident took place. So who killed those people? The government agents who were setting them up, agent provocateurs. We call him Geronimo Jijaga Pratt, all right? Geronimo just passed away a couple of years or so ago. His case was not unique. It was not unique. This is the norm. And under Barack Obama, it's even more so this way. Now, I want to say this, but we need to understand that don't become paranoid, all right? Do not become paranoid. Just understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who have no conscience. I don't know if I want to call them people. We're dealing with creatures who have no conscience, who have no morals. They are amoral. They're not immoral. They're amoral. They're worse than immoral. And they lie through their teeth. Why, they couldn't breathe if they couldn't lie. So we just need to understand that. Once we understand that, we know they're going to do what they're going to do, but we're going to do what we're going to do. And as Reverend Edward Pinkney said, it's a lot more of us than it is of them. And once we start uniting, there's a woman named Margaret Mead, the late Margaret Mead. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful people can make a difference. In fact, as she said, it's the only thing that ever has. Mm-hmm. Okay? That was Margaret Mead. And, and about that, Sister was absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
It worries me that the NSA story going mainstream in the last couple of years makes people so paranoid they get paralyzed into inaction.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna quote Brother Malcolm. All right, mm-hmm. Brother Malcolm X say, "Sad people don't make change. Mad people do." All right, It's time for us to get mad and get organized and get unified. The time for sadness is over. The time for anger has arrived. And I don't mean uncontrolled, undisciplined anger. Remember that old movie that came out where the guy hung out the window and said, "I'm not going to take it anymore." I'm trying to remember. Network. I'm not going to take it anymore. It's time for the people, black, white, brown, red, yellow people, to say, "I'm not going to take it anymore. I've had it." And we're going to find a way creatively to pool our powers, to bring that together. And will we have differences? Of course we're going to have differences. We better have differences, because if we don't have differences, somebody's lying. But, as Brother Malcolm said, have our differences in the closet, euphemistically speaking, or metaphorically speaking, in the closet. But when we come out we come out as a united front. This is the power, as we said in the original Black Panther Party. This is what we meant when we said all power to the people.
After people get mad, sometimes they don't know the next step to take. And I would suggest at this time a good place to start is in the struggle for Free Pinkney, to join us in the struggle for Free Pinkney. Because what's happening here is coming to your state and eventually coming to you.
You're absolutely right, sister. You're absolutely right. The struggle of Reverend Edward Pinkney and in Benton Harbor does, in fact, embody and encapsulate the struggle that we all, ALL in caps, that all of us must be rigorously and vigorously engaged in. So you're absolutely right. What more can I say? You said it better than I could.
Well, people are mad, but the first thing I hear is, I'm so mad, but I don't know what to do. Well, come over to Free Pinkney, go to the Banco website, go to freepinkney.wordpress.com, and we've outlined, we said there's a link there that says how I can help. Right. And we have to remember that his sentence isn't final. And I worry that some people might have gone into a period of mourning on December 15th. There's going to be a final sentencing on January 15th. And I want people to remember that this is the time to pick up action.
That's right.
This is not the time to hide and say, oh, well, it's such a shame. What can I do now? Now, you please still keep writing letters to the judge. If you happen to know any lawyers or you happen to know a judge, the judge put down letters from activists. Well, hit him with letters from lawyers, get press in your local area. I had some people say to me, well, I live in a cultural wasteland. There's nothing here. By comparison, the areas they were in weren't big cities, but I Googled civil rights organizations in their area, and I Googled radical press in their area. 50 to 100 links came up. And just as an example, I sent those links to them, and they said, oh, wow, I didn't know in a place like Rochester, New York, or Buffalo, New York, there were so many civil rights and other activist organizations. Go in and try to organize with your Occupy group that might be scattered right now and looking for something to unite behind. Mm-hmm. We need as much pressure on Berrien County as possible. We need that hashtag on Facebook, Berrien County, hashtag Free Pinkney, to never be idle. We need Google searches for Berrien County and Pinkney to never be idle. We need articles every day. And on freepinkney.wordpress.com, you'll see a link that says Talking Points for Journalists. If you don't know where to start, Xerox those, memorize them, bring those to your local activist papers. I'm certain that in your area, if you can't get the mainstream news to write about it, you can definitely, there are activist papers that want to write about Reverend Pinkney.
Or how about calling in to talk radio shows, whether it's Tom Hartman or Tavis Smiley or any of those shows that take calls. We need definitely more people just trying to bring more national media attention to this issue.
Sister and brother, both of you are absolutely correct. And I'm so glad you're putting it out there because, we're only stifled when we allow ourselves to be stifled. I write for I write right now for Intrepid Report, intrepidreport.com. And I always say, forward ever, backwards never. I always say, each one, reach one, each one, reach one, each one, teach one. And what you all have just said, both of you all, both you, Daniela, and Kyle, you've said to people, hey, this is what you can do. And you're not just doing that for Reverend Edward Pinkney. That's important, but you're doing it for yourself. We're doing it for ourselves because we are in great peril. We are in great peril. Our nation, we're in great peril, but we can do something about it. We don't sit back and say, you got me fired up now, sis.
I love that. Each one, reach one. Don't get overwhelmed and think, I have to organize my whole community. Go out and make it a goal to get one article. Article. Write to us at taxwallstreetparty@gmail and say, here's my article, or to bhbanco.org and say, here's my article. Mm-hmm. Do that. Start a Twitter and just keep writing tweets at Berrien County. Because if they believe, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Larry, but if they believe that Reverend Pinkney is more of a problem in prison than out, that's going to be a big factor on January 15th.
Well, you know what? He is more of a problem in prison than out. And I'm smiling
But they were hoping it was going to go away, though, Larry.
But it's not. You dig? It's not going to go away. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We the people. Sometimes go back and read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. I don't know how many of us in this nation have even read. Read the preamble. If you don't want to read the whole declaration, fine. Read the preamble and see what it says that we need to do when our so-called representatives do not represent us. What do we need to do? It's very simple. Plain, simple, logical language. I just want to say this too, sister, and my brother Kyle. I want to say this. The final sentence is the sentence of the people. All right? The final sentence will be passed when the people, when a critical mass, I didn't say the masses, I said a critical mass of people say, we've had it, no more, and we are passing sentence on those bloodsuckers who have been emaciating us for decades and decades and decades. That's the final sentence. I am absolutely certain that Reverend Edward Pinkney, as well as other political prisoners, but in this case, we're talking about Reverend Edward Pinkney, who has fought for decades in Benton Harbor and in Detroit. You know, Reverend Edward Pinkney originally came from Chicago, as I understand. But my point is, he's been fighting a long time. It's a long struggle. You know, I've been fighting in the struggle for over 45 years. And the struggle goes on. A luto continua. It goes on. As we say in Swahili, la cima tushende mbele shaka, which simply means that the struggle goes on and we shall conquer without a doubt. We shall conquer what? We shall conquer ignorance. We shall conquer division. We shall conquer these things and bring about, incrementally, we are going to bring about what we said in the original Black Panther Party, all power to the people. You know, if we don't use it, if we do not use it, then sister, brother, we're going to lose it. So we're going to use it.
As Kyle said in the last episode, history is a long, bloody struggle to enshrine human rights.
And he's right.
If people are looking for a motivation, I mean, I think you also have to look backwards and say, what did the members of the Black Panther Party do for you? What did people like Malcolm X do for you? What is Reverend Pinkney doing for you right now? You know, you owe, as a member of this society, to give back your energy and your time and whatever talents you have to try to contribute your part in this struggle. You can't be a spectator when other people are dying and rotting in jail trying to protect your rights. Right. You know, people always talk, no disrespect to the military, but talking about how the military is protecting our freedoms. You know, they're protecting the interests of ExxonMobil and Halliburton and contractors. But look at the people who are trying to protect your freedoms, and what are you doing to give back to them? Right.
And that is no insult to the military, because let me tell you, people like Cindy Sheehan, whose son Casey died in Iraq in 2004. You dig? Cindy woke up. Sister woke up. She said, wait a damn minute here. Whoa. Why did my son die? What was he fighting for? Whose interest was he actually protecting? It wasn't the interest of the people. He was trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. But we get bamboozled. Like Brother Malcolm said, we get bamboozled. I would urge people, I want to refer to Martin Luther King's speech, Beyond Vietnam. I cannot be silent. Beyond Vietnam. Read that speech, and Lord knows, you're going to think that Martin is talking to you today. The only difference is that instead of it being Vietnam, it's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq. I mean, it's an endless list. Bahrain.
Syria, Ukraine.
I mean, exactly. I'm so glad you mentioned Ukraine, too. Absolutely. It's an endless list. So I urge people, just all you got to do is just take out Vietnam and put all those other countries in. And here we are. So I strongly believe all of us, the modus, if you will, MODIS, the modus for real change. Not that old jive time, half-stepping, BS, hope and change nonsense that the Obamatron passed off on the people. You know, Obama's second largest, or his biggest supporters were all corporate supporters. The media didn't tell you that, though, did they? Oh, all these little people giving $5, $1. Okay, right. But the reality is, his biggest supporters were companies like Lockheed Corporation, and even more than Lockheed. Check this out: Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, don't forget the Wall Street banks.
Mm-hmm. Right. Understand? Goldman Sachs. That should tell us something. But of course, the vomit stream, corporate stream media wasn't going to be open and honest. Are you kidding? Why, they are totally, I'm trying to be nice. Well, not nice, but just diplomatic. They are the lapdogs of the corporate controlled government. We have to be, we the people. I keep on going back to the Declaration of Independence and to the U.S. Constitution. We the people. We the people. That's what this is about. We the people. So I think that all of us have a responsibility, and I like the way you put it, Kyle, my brother. It's a responsibility. We have a responsibility, you dig? We cannot allow others to suffer on our behalf without doing our part as well. We all have different parts to play. Old people, young people, middle-aged people, whatever. We all have our parts to play. But we got to do it. As Frantz Fanon said, you know, we either have to fulfill or betray our mission. That's what we have to do. Fulfill it or betray it. I believe that we, the people, will fulfill it.
I'd just like to say, Larry, thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope you can be a regular guest to give Pinkney updates.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniela.
We're going to close the show tonight, Larry, on an excerpt from Martin Luther King's speech you recommended, Beyond Vietnam. You've been listening to United Front Radio at ucy.tv. Have a blessed evening.
So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such. Perhaps a more tragic recognition of reality took place when it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and to die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Holland. And so we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schools. And so we watch them in brutal solidarity, burning the huts of a poor village, but we realize that they would hardly live on the same block in Chicago. I could not be silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor. My third reason moves to an even deeper level of awareness, for it grows out of my experience in the ghettos of the North over the last 3 years, especially the last 3 summers. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government, for the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. For those who ask the question, aren't you a civil rights leader? And thereby mean to exclude me from the movement for peace, I have this further answer. In 1957, when a group of us formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we chose as our motto to save the soul of America. We were convinced that we could not limit our vision to certain rights for black people, but instead affirmed the conviction that America would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of its slaves were loosed completely from the shackles they still wear.